I might as well show you how I polish the blades, I suppose. This is a block of foam rubber. It's quite stiff. And taking a bit of metal polish on a cotton bud, I will polish that blade. And here I'm using another cotton bud to hold it in position as I work on it. And I'll go through each of the 5 blades, and hopefully when I'm done they'll show no marks, they will be plain. If it wasn't for the reinforcing plates and so forth on these blades, I would have probably polished them as a matter of course, but as I say, it creates problems. So I only do polishing on blades like this if I decide that there's a great need. Of course, very likely no one's going to service this shutter ever again. And by the time it does need servicing, it won't be my pigeon. I'll be long planted by then. Now I have to try and get these blades clean of the polish, which is the hard part. I'll use some CRC Electroclean for that and hopefully blow all the polish away. Well, as you can see here, the shutter blades are now clean, free from any marking on those blades. They're quite shiny and there's no corrosion marks or anything on there to be seen. I'm very pleased with that result, even though I would have preferred not to have to polish them because of the reinforcing plates and the polish running through underneath. However that might be, the shutter there is basically sound and very good, and I'll continue on cleaning the rest of the components and reassembling things, in full knowledge that I'm probably going to have to spend quite a bit of time mucking around getting my speed train, retard gear train here timed correctly. Right, piece by piece. This is the B lever, and the B lever's job is to hold the shutter blades in the open position when the shutter is set on B. And it holds them open, of course, only as long as you've got your finger on the shutter release, or the cable release for that matter. See if I can get this screw in. all of this is mildly disconcerting because the components are similar to the Seikosha-Rapid shutters, so I know where everything will go, but screws are a different shape. The levers in fact are a different shape, and as a result things don't automatically fall to hand as readily as I'd expect. This catch holds the shutter in the cocked position. It's awkward to get into position. In the contour shutter too, because the post has to sit down in a hole which is right on the edge of a cutout or recess, so it's difficult to get it aligned. That's okay, that's in. I've got to get spring position correctly, and that needs to be swung all the way back round here and hooked behind this lever. And that is a really awkward looking arrangement. See if that tucks down under there. Pretty sure it did. Yeah, it does. Okay, very awkward arrangement for springs. But very positive in its action. The high speed spring, or 500th of a second spring, I'll just give that a little wipe of molybdenum paste through the centre where it pivots on its post. That sits there. That should pass through underneath that lever. It does. And this lever, one of whom's tasks is to be the return spring for the shutter release, sits on a post there. Goes underneath that B lever, over the top of it. The B lever has to tuck in underneath it. You have to get its spring seated down in the case. That's it. A little bit cursed, that lever. It's not easy to get into position. Then we have the shutter release lever. And I'll just lubricate the working surfaces there. That sits here. Couples to these levers like that, and this lever is operated by the shutter release lever, and that would lift that out of contact with the main lever and allow the shutter to release. When the shutter's in the uncocked position, this lever sits here and blocks the action of the shutter release. That screw's not tightening up in the mechanism plate there. Means it's stripped out. Okay, fun and games. It may even not be the correct screw for that job. It looks a little bit suspiciously small. I'll get it out and look around in my parts bins and see if I can find something a bit bigger. Yeah, it does look a little bit small. Right, I'll be back when I've found a replacement. That was simply the wrong screw for the job. It means that someone on a previous occasion had lost the screw and replaced it with something unsuitable. I chose another screw from my spare parts container. It's screwed in, no arguments, and screwed in smoothly, so it's not as though the thread on the mechanism plate was damaged. The screw that had been fitted was simply the wrong size. Oh well, that's something interesting to discover. I better clean up this main lever and then we can put it into place. There's a few marks on it there where it's lost the plating. I don't think they're wear marks. Potentially they could be. I'll check. And the plating's come off over here too. So it's just not a wonderfully made component. That's okay. I don't think that'll cause us any problems in use. So I'll run round the inside edge with some molybdenum paste, round the outside edge with some molybdenum paste, and then on the bird paw I'll run some on that, and on the tail. I'm looking at the state of this main spring here. I think that's okay. And we'll see if this will go into place and connect. That needs to tuck under there, that tucks into there. Swing that aside, swing that aside, swing that aside, swing that aside. Hook the spring over the tab. Check that everything's in position. Everything feels quite good at this stage. The speed setting cam plate, I'll just give that a wipe. Oh, it's got some marks on it. I thought that's where they'd have rubbed through the plating, but it turns out that they are just fossilised grease. Right, wipe the molybdenum paste around the inside, around the cam surfaces there, and where it picks up the 500th of a second spring at that point. Let's put this in place and see if the shutter will behave. Well, it's alive. B works nicely. The 10th should probably be about there. It even sounds credible. I'm going to put the top plate on and then go and test the shutter speeds here, because I'd have to be very lucky to have put the retard gear train in exactly the same position that it started with, or at least exactly the same position it needed to be. So I'll need to check this. This plate's got its marker on there for the shutter speed, so I can check what I'm getting, and then I can start the struggle of getting the speeds correct. That's probably fast. That's definitely fast. Right, I'll go and find out what I've got. In the interests of making this as simple as possible, I'm going to remove the main lever and fit the shutter back to the front of the camera, because I have to put my flash contact back in here, and I'd rather have the shutter open so that I can see what's happening with the contact and make sure that I have a clear understanding of how that works. I think that what happens is that as this lever opens, this pin comes forward, and I think the contact rests on that pin, which looks like it's insulated, and as this comes forward it allows the moving contact, the fixed contact, to hit this post and complete the circuit. I think that's how it works. So I'm going to put this back on the camera and hopefully I'm correct. First I'll just clean the front of the camera here a bit. Now I have my shims here. Got a paper shim and an aluminium shim. Now interestingly, there's the remains of a partial shim there. I don't know whether that was a shim that's disintegrated on a previous repairer, and so they've just left in the bits that were remained there, or not. Close that down. I certainly don't see those scraps. They're not with the shutter, so they didn't come out with the shutter, and presumably been missing for a long time. That will do. Here are my two shims. Here's my shutter. And the flash contact fits in there. I'll hold that there with my finger. I'll just zoom you in a bit. As this opens, it allows this contact to meet that contact. Okay, and it does work. I can see that. The timing is certainly not going to be suitable for electronic flash, because it makes so early the blades that are hardly opened. Would probably suit bulb flash. See if I can get this thing positioned on here correctly. And I have the answer to that business of the wrong screw internally in the shutter, I think. Because I have spare here the screw that should have been in the shutter and wasn't. Right, I'll find that small screw. Well, that's 10 minutes of my life I'm not getting back. It took me bloody ages to find that screw in my container of loose screws where I'd thrown it yesterday. But it's back in place. And I will have to bend that contact to make it work as I want it to. Let's see if we can get this shutter correctly positioned in the case. I think I've got my wire trapped underneath there somewhere. That appears to be seated. Right, I'll get my retaining ring on the back of that and move on. See if I can screw my retaining ring back in place. I don't know why these retaining rings are so hard to get started. It may be that they don't have any chamfer or lead in to help you get them seated. That's it, started. Check that the shutter's firmly seated. Right, I was just pushing that around with the point of my tweezers, which of course is not good for my fine tweezers, but that's life as we know it. So I'm just checking the state of this flash contact now. And it appears to me it makes much too early. Yeah, it's making contact right there when the blades are just opening. So I've got to change the shape of this contact so that it makes contact later. Oh, now I've got no tension on that at all. Right, I can see this will be fun. If I remove that post, it'll give me some working space while I try and tension that contact. And put the post back again and see if I've achieved what I wanted it to achieve. I've certainly achieved some of it. Makes contact about there. I need more than that though. Unhook that spring, shift that completely out of the way, remove my post again, have another go at that spring, that contact rather. Yeah, it really lacks a lot of tension there. Of course, if I overdo it, you know what will happen. That contact will just snap. And I'll be hunting around furiously for something I can use to do the job instead. It's certainly making contact with it at that point. What? No, I need more than that. Better let me ponder this one.